Well, good afternoon, everybody. What a beautiful Indigenous Peoples Day Sunday and Father's Day. Thank you for worshiping so beautifully today. What a wonderful time we've already had. So tender. And are you enjoying the World Cup? What a man. I must say that one of my favorite things is to watch. No matter what country it is, it seems like they're multicultural, doesn't it? Doesn't matter what country's playing. Like it's, you know, black, white, and everything in between on the world stage. And my favorite, I think my favorite recent memory is the Iranian goal. I watched most of the game before I came. The Iranian goalkeeper was unbelievable, standing on his head. And I've seen just a number of just incredible athleticism and teamwork and Canada. Oh my gosh! I mean, that beautiful moment when the substitute lifted up Coney's jersey after he'd scored the goal, and I cried. And then I read later how the Qatar player that had injured him went in and apologized to the whole team, and I cried again. So it's been fun. More crying to come, I'm sure, of joy and pain, I'm sure. So today we are continuing this teaching series called The New Exodus. If you're just joining us, Matthew portrays Jesus as the new Moses, and his book is kind of like a new Torah with 5 major discourses of Jesus. And Jesus leading us into a new Exodus, the ultimate Exodus, based on the original story. And we've been going through the Sermon on the Mount, and we're now moving into the last chapter of the Sermon on the Mount. So the question I want to ask is, what does do not judge have to do with the new Exodus? Remember that the Sermon on the Mount is not good advice, it's good news. It's a proclamation and an announcement, especially with those Beatitudes that come out. And Exodus, the original Exodus, was a deliverance from empire, namely where people were expendable for the system, for the machine, right? And it was a deliverance into a new and a beloved community where everyone is precious, where everyone matters. There's no hierarchy of importance, and all have a place at the table. And we've learned already that in this beloved community, as we've gone through the Sermon on the Mount, there's no place for contempt of another human being, regardless of how they've behaved. There's no place for out-of-control rage, sexual objectification of others. There's no room for verbal manipulation and competition and religious showmanship. Worship of money. There's no place for allowing worry to control our values and decisions. And now Jesus addresses another critical issue in this beloved community. There's to be no judging. Now that sounds like very good news indeed, because for most of us, the idea of being judged doesn't feel good. It has negative connotations. Perhaps going back to when we first felt shamed in our childhood for some reason, humiliated with a bad mark at school, cut from the basketball team. Not so much that we were cut, but maybe the way it happened, right? Where it just had everything to do with us being cut off from community. Or we're judged on the basis of our comparison, of our looks, our athletic ability, or lack thereof, or academic ability, or lack thereof, personality traits. And in the new Exodus, Jesus delivers us from all of that. The empire that is performance-oriented, based on comparison and competition, which in themselves are not bad in themselves, right? Look at the World Cup. But where our identity is not tied up with it, right? And he invites us into a beloved community where we, the beloved children of God, are of infinite worth just for who we are. Now, keep in mind that the context for Jesus saying this is that it was huge in Jesus' time. And we see it coming up many times in the Gospels in the form of criticism against who? Who got criticized a lot in the Gospels? Who got criticized? Who's the object of the criticism? Jesus, right? He got judged a lot. And the self-appointed guardians of righteousness, of course, were the Pharisees and the religious leaders, the experts, the teachers of the law, the self-appointed guardians of holiness and righteousness. And let's keep in mind, you've heard me say this before, they had legitimate concerns. If I was them, I were them, I was them. Kathleen, help me. If I were them, I was them. My English teacher over here. I would be concerned too. Because Israel had national trauma. They were still in this national trauma. They still had in their corporate memory what happened at the destruction of Jerusalem in 570 AD. And they were concerned that if they didn't get their moral act together, it would happen again. And they would go back into captivity. So they actually regarded their biggest enemies as within. It was those sinners. It was those compromisers, those tax collectors, those Sabbath breakers, those prostitutes, those Samaritans and those Gentiles who keep sneaking in. Jesus came announcing a new order, turning things upside down. And he kept associating with the wrong kind of people. He touched the untouchables. It's interesting. This has happened to me before. I'm reading through the book of Leviticus now, right? And I always stay in the gospel. So no matter where I read in the Bible, I make sure I have a gospel reading. And it's just surreal for me to read something in Leviticus, which, by the way, can be incredibly tender. It can be just this most compassionate. But then there's these holiness laws and these purity laws. And so then when I go to read the gospel, it just seems that Jesus breaks the rules, goes against the Torah. And you know one of the most famous stories where he did that? Well, not where he did it, but he tells this story. You remember the story of the Good Samaritan? Why did the Levite and the priest not want to stop for that guy that was lying by the roadside? They would risk becoming ceremonially impure, right? Especially if he's dead, then forget celebrating any religious things for at least a day, right? So this Samaritan, who's broken all kinds of rules, he stops. He's the neighbor. Oh, here, let me tuck it in. Thanks for noticing that. Thanks, Kim. So over and over again, Jesus was flouting all kinds of standards. And how many times do you read in the Gospels where it says they were watching him closely? Right? So we can just go to the... Oh, it's working. Good. So Jesus, in that context, hits it head on. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. With the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Now, I love how he's expressing concern for us, his audience. He's saying, I don't want you to be judged, so don't set yourself up for it. It's not karma. As Pierre Teilhard de Chardin wrote, love is the physical structure of the universe. The universe is wired for love, and to go against love is to self-harm. The word for judge here is krino, and it means to condemn, to pass sentence on somebody. There's a finality about it. Literally a labeling and a demonizing that happens. Worst of all, it assumes the seat of God, as this level of judgment is only God's prerogative. So there's a huge amount of arrogance and lack of self-awareness involved, because it assumes that the person is seeing things as well as God sees them. It destroys the beloved community by cutting people off Instead of a place of belonging at the table, people are condemned, shamed, labeled, dehumanized, and demonized, often in the name of God. It breaks relationships. Judging breaks relationships between parents and children, between generations, because I think a lot of times we judge our kids, between would-be disciples and our culture, between generations, between races, ethnicities, and religions. I believe the sin of judging was one of the biggest problems with colonization. That's why residential schools came. Cultural genocide and religious violence is we judged thinking we were seeing things from God's perspective. Now, while the idea of not judging sounds nice, it can create tensions, can't it? After all, do we just say, oh, that's okay, I'm not judging? When someone is acting in a way that is toxic, destructive to the community in other ways. So let's clear some things up and remind ourselves that Jesus often, if not most times, spoke hyperbolically through the Sermon on the Mount. He's confronting things. What he is not saying is that everything is sweetness and light and we aren't to address or confront evil. He's not saying that. He's also saying that he's not saying that Christians can't be a judge in the law court. Some people have actually taken this verse to mean that. You can't be a lawyer or a judge, right? That's not what he's saying. He's not saying that we shouldn't have boundaries and that we don't need discernment. He's not saying that we don't try to help people with change. What is often missed here is that Jesus is actually making the point that the person that you are reaching out to does need help. That brother has something in their eye. They need help. So it's not whether or not you help them, it's how you do it. Because sometimes your helping is hurting, right? So that's the point here. So he makes that point. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? For illustration purposes, this is a plank. All right? Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye when you have a plank in your own eye? And how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. He's not saying to ignore the speck. In fact, it would be unloving. Somebody's got something in their eye. It would be unloving to not help them. This happened with Kathleen and me the other day on a walk, where a little tiny white bug landed on her lower eyelid. Yeah, flew right in, and she was just beside herself, trying to get it out. Now, it would have been very unloving for me to not try to help her attend to that. However, it would have been equally unloving for me to try to help her. Here, let me help you, honey. Right? With a plank in my own eye. So, what Jesus meant by judging is where our help is hurting because of the log in our eye. And he's challenging this massive lack of self-awareness that comes with most judging. The lack of self-awareness is the plank. It's a blindness. And an important first step in removing the plank, I'm going to talk about removing the plank so we can be a helpful community for each other, is understanding why we have a tendency. I think it's important to understand why we judge, why we do this. And if the shoe fits, wear it. But if it doesn't, fine. But here's some reasons. Number one, we judge because we have an extremely limited perspective, and we think we have it all sorted out. Richard Rohr said, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. Another way he said it is every viewpoint is a view from a point, yours. So Paul wrote, therefore, judge nothing before the appointed time. Wait until the Lord comes. He will bring to light what is hidden in darkness and will expose the motives of the heart. At that time, each will have their praise from God. So there's just an extreme, limited perspective. that judging is caused by. My friend Rob Powell, who planted, I first got to know Rob and Rod Bitterman down at Vancouver Christian Life Center downtown back in the 80s, and then he went out and planted Westside, was it Kitsilano Community Church, yeah. And I heard him say one day, it's like still framing. It's like when you catch somebody with a photograph, right? And your view of them, especially first impressions. You know that saying, you never get a second chance to make a good first impression, right? So sometimes we meet somebody and just something is off, and we take a picture and we photograph in our psyche. Or it could be some other incident where we still frame them and we hold them stuck in that place. Secondly, we lack empathy. We don't appreciate the suffering that others are going through. We may see the external behavior, but we don't know what's going on in their heart, right? We don't know the demonic activity that's going on. We don't appreciate their private hell that they're going through. We place ourselves over another, and I forget the name of the psychologist. He's a Christian. He's not a Christian, but he's a Canadian brain specialist. And I've talked to some of you about this already this week. He said that, you remember that phrase? Oh yeah, I was talking to Kirsten about this last week at the Gibosh party. Is they have found that to actually hold power, a position of power, mitigates your ability to empathize with people. There's something that happens in the brain that you have to be aware of when you hold power. And that could be an actual position of power, but that could also be where you put yourself in a place of power. You're the expert. So knowing that, I mean, we've known that psychologically and spiritually, that you have to have ways to address that. There has to be accountability. There has to be self-awareness. I recommend spiritual direction and other ways to make sure that that empathy, whatever that is not being diminished. And of course, we have that example in God, in the way that God holds power. Thirdly, this is another, and you might have your own reasons. The false self is validated by othering and putting others down. We've heard it say, especially in the culture wars, we have to have somebody to hate to validate ourselves. So we may have a degree of camaraderie in our own tribe, but we have to other somebody else and make them our common enemy. And so we are validated by judging. Fourthly, a person's negative traits are often more visible than their positive traits. For example, if I was to show you, you've all seen this before, a white sheet of paper with a little dot in the middle, I'd ask you what you see. You'd say, oh, there's a dot, right? In the middle of the sheet of paper. It's just the nature of it's human nature. So Jesus says, now this sounds really judgy, doesn't it? Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. He's not calling people dogs and pigs. He's using hyperbole to illustrate that you're not being helpful, and you're actually going to hurt yourself if you, with good intentions, are trying to help people with things that they're not able to digest, they're not able to comprehend or receive. You've learned that, right? So yes, that could include giving someone the gospel who's not ready to receive it, but there are all kinds of scenarios in our relationships every day where you need that discernment. Is this person ready to receive this? Right? So how do you remove the lumber from your eye? The lumber yard. How to remove this log? Well, practicing self-awareness is really important. But then Jesus goes on and it almost seems like he changes the topic. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Oh, okay, so you're done with that topic, Lord? Now we're going on to prayer? But wait a minute, he just talked about prayer a few verses before for quite a long time. So why is he going back to it? What's going on here? For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks, the door will be open. At first glance, it seems like Jesus has just changed the subject, which he sometimes seems to do. But I think there's good evidence that he's still talking about judging and how to remove the lumber from our eye. For most of us, as I said, judgment has negative connotations, but I want to show how God's judgment is actually good news. Look at this amazing psalm I just read, I think yesterday or the day before. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth, for he comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness and the peoples with equity. I don't have time to read the whole psalm, but what I love about this psalm is it's a call, first of all, to the congregation to worship the Lord because he's coming to judge the earth. Then it's a call to all the nations to worship. And it was in our psalm again today. All the nations will come and worship the Lord because he's coming to judge the world with equity. And then finally the psalm says, all of creation, the trees, the mountains, the sky, the stars, worship the Lord because he's coming to judge the world. So why is this good news? Because true judgment is God taking whatever action is necessary to make all things right, to bring justice, righteousness, and peace on the earth. It's what fuels us so that we don't, in our battle against evil, we don't judge. And the greatest example in our lifetime is a man who said these words. And it's why he was able to confront evil and confront injustice with such courage and effectiveness. He said these words: the arc, the moral arc of the universe is bent. It's long, but it's bending towards justice. Right? Who said that? Martin Luther King. It was hope that fueled his courage. It was hope that kept him from getting bitter and getting eaten up by unforgiveness and rage and hate. He said, you can spray us with your fire hose, you can beat us with your batons, but you cannot make us hate you. Because the moral arc of the universe is on our side. We know where this is going. Right? John said it this way: for God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world. That's that word krino. But to save the world through him. The aim of God's judgment is restorative. Restorative. So taking the log out is to partner with God. And Jesus brings prayer in because it's almost like he's saying there's this shift we have to make when we have to choose between, am I going to remain an armchair critic or am I going to be an intercessor? It's like this invitation. Am I going to be an armchair critic that just simply makes the world more like it already is? Or am I going to be an intercessor that literally partners with God for change? Starting with myself. Starting with me. Right? So taking out the log is to partner with God in prayer as an agent of restoration, not destruction. To move from being a critic, that is the language of empire, to being an intercessor, which is the language of the praying, beloved community. An intercessor is not just someone who prays for others, but rather, first of all, they identify with that person. So, extreme example, no, not excusing one iota of what he did, but I was reading about Hitler's childhood this week, and we watched a documentary about Hitler's beginnings. Have you read what happened to him in his childhood? I mean, right? Beaten every day. Not just with physically, but words, verbally abusive, right? Doesn't excuse. But part of intercession is identifying with why the person is doing what they're doing, right? Abusers abuse because they've been abused. Hurt people because they've been hurt, right? And the ultimate example of identification was God himself. God didn't look down and say, get your act together. Richard Rohr writes a wonderful book called The Tears of Things, and he talks about how the prophets in the Old Testament, they start out with this anger and this rage, and they project it onto God because they're so pissed off at what everybody's doing. Excuse my language. Father's Day, I get away with it. Right? But as they bring their rage to God, as they pray those imprecatory prayers, all of a sudden there's this confrontation with God's restorative justice, with God's mercy, with God's unilateral covenant. I mean, look at Jeremiah, the first few chapters. Rage, hell, judgment. You're going to get it. God's going to smite you. And all of a sudden, right in the middle of it, he says, oh, the Lord says he's going to make a covenant with you. Not like the former one, which you didn't keep. This one's going to be unconditional, unilateral. The last one was bilateral. You do this, I do this. You do this, I do this. This one's unconditional, unilateral. I'm not going to remember your sins anymore. And I'm going to write my law on your mind and on your heart. Jeremiah, Ezekiel, same thing. Have you ever read the first 20 chapters of Ezekiel? Oh, my Lord, it gives me nightmares. But all of a sudden, you just see this change. As they bring their rage, their imprecatory prayers to God. They even project onto God their own anger. But you start seeing this shift. Right? And so what God did is God looked down and said, they're starting to get it, but we need to show them how to do this. So God came down and identified with us, became one with us, felt our pain, suffered with us, and that is what true intercession does. It identifies with someone, feels their anguish, giving us compassion and empathy as we cry out to God on their behalf. The prophets, Hosea, one of my favorites. God says, it's often a bride and bridegroom kind of metaphor, but there's parts of Hosea where God says, how could I ever forsake you, my child? How could I ever let you go? Right? God is so identified with us. You know, we all have people in our lives. You know what I'm talking about. You feel their pain, whether it's a child or spouse or grandchild. It's mystical. It's beautiful. You just so identify with their longings, their desires, and you want what they want. You want them to flourish and to do well, to see their dreams come true. And when they suffer, you hurt, right? That's identification in anguish. Well, guess what? God feels that for every person on earth. The way that you anguish over your son or daughter or your grandkids or your spouse or your close friend, the way that you feel their pain, God does that for every human being. And I've been feeling that as I watch the World Cup. I don't want anybody to lose. I just love it. I love watching the fans from the different countries. Wow. This is just a tiny little tip of how God feels for all the peoples of the earth. And then out of that comes authority, not domination, but the authority of love to make a difference, to change things. Which of you, if your son asks for a bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So in everything you do to others, what you would have them do to you. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. In other words, we're all connected. What I do to you, you do to me. Remember the bully song I sang at camp? Now listen, all you bullies, what these words I say are true. Do to others as you would have them do to you. Right? That's the law of the universe. We're connected. So Paul describes it this way. This is an example in the early church. Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourself. Watch that log, or you may also be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks they are something when they're not, they deceive themselves. Self-awareness, right? Really important. Keep that empathy going, right? Be aware, be aware, be aware. So trying to affect change by judging makes things more like they already are. A prayerful, interceding community of love opens the door to real and lasting change, starting with ourselves. Now, as we said a few weeks ago, it's not that we just pray, because we talked about how that often when we pray, God says, okay, well, I'm going to answer that prayer, and you're going to be part of the answer, right? That's what happened with the children of Israel with Moses. God says, good news, I'm coming to deliver them. Bad news for you, Moses. Go and speak to Pharaoh, right? Moses said, here am I, send Aaron. So, for reflection, let's get to kids, eh? For reflection and communion, where might there be a log in my eye that is hindering me from loving well? And what might be the next step God is inviting me to take in removing it? Where might there be a log in my eye that is hindering me from loving well? And what might the next step be that God is inviting me to take in removing it? Now let me give a few things that I felt the Holy Spirit. We need to put on the right glasses. There's a Chakra elder, this just came in my inbox this morning. He's an Episcopal bishop, Steve Charleston. He describes how this love and foundational hope surrounds us at all times. He says this, sometimes in this troubled world of ours, we forget that love is all around us. Right? Remember what Jesus said in the last chapter? If your eye is good, your whole body's full of light. If your eye is bad, your whole body's full of darkness. So in this troubled world of ours, we forget that love is all around us. We imagine the worst of other people. We withdraw into our own shells. But listen to what this indigenous elder says. We try this simple test. Stand still. Next time you get a chance. I've done this. Brings me to tears. Try this simple test. Stand still in a crowded place and watch people around you. Within a very short time, you'll begin to see love. You will see it over and over and over again. A young mom talking to her child. A couple laughing together as they walk. An old man holding the door for a stranger. Small signs of love are everywhere. The more you look, the more you will see. Love is literally everywhere. We're surrounded by love. So hope, remember the ark? Hope makes room for love in this world. Wow. So put on the right glasses. Make sure you're walking with the right glasses. And here's something I felt the Spirit say. One of the people that we judge the most is ourselves. And I believe this communion is an invitation for you to receive God's mercy and love and to stop judging yourself. Now, here's how I often judge myself. Yeah, I chew myself out sometimes. That happens when I drop something, or, you clumsy idiot, what are you doing? Right? Those things happen. No, I'm getting better, right, hon? She's got to think about that. But, yeah. No, Kathleen will tell you the truth, that's for sure. I know that. But I know, yes, less berating. But what I noticed was that I had to forgive my younger self. There's stuff I did in my 20s, in the name of God, where I think back and I go, what the hell? What was I thinking? How could I do that? You know, part of it was, when I was cut from the basketball team in grade 7, the way that it was done, cutting is not bad. You can't have everybody on the team, and I was in the lower end of junior high at that time, so fair enough. But the way it was done, I was publicly shamed and humiliated. And I made a vow, that'll never happen again. That'll never happen again. I made every team from then on, was a high scorer, but you know what? That carried on into ministry. I'm going to have the biggest youth group. We're going to have the most successful program, blah, 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 blah. That same thing of shame and judging drove me. That's why I thank God for my nervous breakdown. God stuck out his foot and tripped me. He said, let's start afresh, right? So some of us need to forgive our younger selves. The Lord's come very compassionately alongside of me, and he said to me, you were just doing what you knew to do. It was mixed. It wasn't all bad. There was some good, right? It wasn't all bad. And would you be willing to show yourself compassion in the way that I'm showing you compassion? I see the big picture. I see your wounds. I see what drove you.